Welcome to our 2021 DIA one-on-one video series. I'm looking forward to speaking with Geoffrey Gill, President of Shimmer Americas, about the potential of wearables. Hi, Geoffrey, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing very well. And yourself?
I'm great. Thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us. Tell me, how would you describe wearables' potential to improve clinical trials and clinical research?
Well, wearables are one of the few technologies that really has the potential to transform clinical trials. And I say that because they're changing how you judge the outcomes. Today, so many trials, they have sporadic measures of outcomes, and they're occasional and also sometimes subjective. Wearables go and make that continuous and objective measures. And let me take an example. If you think about it, most of what we're measuring today is chronic illness. And so people have up days and down days. Well, if the trial happens to measure them on an up day, everything looks great. They think it's, the patient's improving. If they measure them on a down day, then it looks like they're getting worse. Well, if you have a continuous measure, then the ups and the downs become actually part of a complete picture of how the patient is doing. And with that, you get a much more accurate view. And with accuracy, you don't have as much noise. You can reduce potentially the number of participants. You can potentially shorten the length of the trial. You can get more accurate trials. So you don't end up with a phase 3 trial that fails because it turns out the phase 2 results aren't replicated. So tremendous potential for really changing how trials work.
And yet, with so much potential, there's some barriers that remain. And what are some of those barriers? And then how can we overcome those barriers?
Well, first of all, it's not the technology. There's great technology out there. There's no question about that. What really is the issue is the lack of accepted endpoints. So if you think about it, if you don't have an accepted endpoint, in other words, a measure of whether the patient's getting better or worse, the data that you collect is really not valuable in a trial. If you can't use it to prove that your treatment is working. But the challenge is it's a fair amount of work to prove that an endpoint is acceptable or can be used in a trial. The Digital Medicine Society has a V3 framework, which is a great framework. Basically, it says, well, first you have to verify that the sensor is getting the right data. Second, that you have to prove analytic validation, that basically what you're measuring is actually corresponds to the physical phenomenon that you might want to measure, like the amount of activity or sleep or whatever. And then finally, there's clinical validation, where you need to show that that physical phenomenon is actually relevant to the disease. So going through that process is a fair amount of work for almost all of these companies. But the problem is that if you think about it, I know there's one database that has over 1,000 devices that can be used for trials. There are literally thousands of algorithms out there. There are different cohorts and different diseases, and if you kind of put the combinatorial situation together, that's huge. You can't possibly manage all of that. So what we need to do is we need to figure out a way to break these into component parts. And then we need to collaborate and standardize. That's how we address this. And I can maybe go into a little detail there. If you think about it, on the verifying the wearable, every manufacturer should do that. But what they have to do is they actually have to come out with data that's in a format that can then be taken with an algorithm, any algorithm. Whereas so many wearable companies now look and do their own proprietary algorithms. And the problem with that is that once you get into your own proprietary algorithm, then you have to go through the whole V3 framework again and again and again. Similarly, if we can share data, we can develop algorithms and do this much more efficiently. You don't need to go out and collect the data, which is really the expensive thing. So there's a lot of opportunity there to streamline this, but it's going to require collaboration and and sharing of data and standardization.
If you had to look into your crystal ball, where do you see the wearables going in the future? Let's say through the next 3 to 5 years, will we see a greater increase in adoption?
Oh, I think there's no question there'll be a greater increase in adoption. It's already happening. A lot of people are looking at it, and COVID is actually obviously a unfortunate thing, but it's really focused people on this. The amount of adoption will depend very much on whether or not we address this issue of endpoints, and that to my mind is the crux of the matter. But in any case, it's going to be significant adoption.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your terrific insights on the future of wearables in clinical research.
Thank you for having me.